After delaying more than 3 months, Vice President Harris is finally headed to the border today. We're excited about that. She avoided traveling to the border for more than 90 days. In that short amount of time of more than 3 months, there's been more than 500,000 encounters. I know she went to other countries before she'd even go down to the border. The number of migrant children crossing the border is again on the rise. This news comes from the same week when there were reporters of despair and isolation at the migrant facilities. I hope she takes the time to talk to the border agents, to listen to them. When I was down there, and she's going to El Paso, that is the location that I first heard when I talked to the border agents, that we had caught people on the terrorist watch list. Not from Central America, but from Yemen. When I came back to the press conference and reported it, we'll all remember Congressman Gallegos said I was a liar. I still haven't got an apology, but I would have thought at least they would have been very concerned about those on the terrorist watch list coming across that border, because that wasn't the last time that happened. But I haven't seen any action taken from there. Also, I hope she spends time talking to the border agents as well, because they will tell the story there is more fentanyl coming across our border today than any time they've been able to witness it. An increase of 300% from May 2020 to May 2021. That doesn't just stay on your border cities. That goes across America. That kills Americans. Comes from China, through Mexico, into America, into the bloodstream, to those, many who end up stop their hearts beating. We need an administration that's going to work to solve these problems. The sad part about all this, there was no bill passed that became law that created this crisis. It was executive orders from the White House. The president put the vice president in charge. She should come back and tell him to reverse those. And most importantly, she should understand how important Title 42 is. Title 42 allows individuals, when they are caught coming across the border illegally, to send them back to their country. If they lift that, this time of basis of a crisis that we already have, it'll all also come insurmountable for the rest. I hope when she spends the time talking to those border agents, she will learn, because of the unaccompanied migrants that come in, the border agents are off the border in caring for them. In some parts of the border, it's more than 40% of the agents are not able to protect because they're inside doing other work. Another crisis that has continued to grow that I've watched even just down there an hour ago. The border was referred to as the new Ellis Island. Congresswoman Escobar referred to the border as Ellis Island, while the vice president and the secretary were there. Is that what the Democrats believe? A crisis they created? Of cartels controlling a border? Of drugs of 300%? Of young children at the age of 3, 2, and 1 with no company of any parent or anybody else around? Ranchers finding them? That's the Ellis Island of today? I think not. After months of ignoring the ongoing crime in American cities, the president finally addressed the violence this week. I thought he would have used that moment to announce tangible actions to restore order, return safety to our communities. You watched just the election of the New York mayor. Maybe we'll find out about who won in a month from now. But what's leading today, I think, should wake up all Democrats. Their idea of defunding the police and now eliminating police is not the message that America wants to hear. They want to hear security and safety. But what are they watching on their televisions after this actions by the Democrats of defunding the police? 2 young children in their own neighborhood in New York, tackled by a man who's running, who's being shot at. Person continues to shoot. Think of what those young children, the PTSD, or what they think within their own neighborhood. But it's not just in that city alone. You turn to the other Democrat-controlled city of Chicago, a young couple going out celebrating a parade. pulled from their car, shot, and murdered on the streets while people watched. This is what defunding of the police does. Let me be very clear from a Republican point of view. We put it in the commitment to America. We will not defund the police. We will add more. We said $1.2 billion for more body cameras, more training, community policing, so those streets will be saved. Those children won't have to experience being tackled by someone being shot at. People wouldn't be pulled from their cars and shot in broad daylight. And last but not least, holding China accountable. As many of you know, we unveiled our 8 pillars. I've watched the Democratic Party here fight to defund the police, open up our borders, but also fight never to hold China accountable. As many of you know, we worked in the last Congress to get a bipartisan China task force. Democrats said yes after 8 months, then declined on the day that we were going to announce it. We went forward with it on our own. More than 2/3 of all the bills recommended were bipartisan. And now that we've watched more than 600,000 Americans die from COVID, we think China should be held accountable. First and foremost, there needs to be transparency. We need to declassify the intelligence so all the world can understand what we know and where it came from. Second, you need to have justice. You got to stop funding gain of function with China. We need to prohibit the NIH from doing any grant when it comes to Iran, China, Russia, or North Korea. We need to overhaul the World Health Organization, including demanding new leadership. Unfortunately, this new administration, when they came in, provided more than $200 million to the World Health Organization, not asking for any changes, just taking hard-earned taxpayer money from America and sending it to an organization that lied to all of us. We need to restrict visa and impose sanctions on China. We need to stop China's special rate at the WTO. We need to work with the international community to push to relocate the 24th Winter Olympics Games. More than 3 million people around the world were killed because of COVID. When China found out about it, what did they do? They stopped domestic flights but kept international flights. I don't think those international flights should be going to China for the Winter Olympics. I don't think the world should reward them. We also need to provide the American people an avenue to directly hold China accountable for their loss. Allow them to be sued in court. Something we have done before. After 9/11, we should hold that same accountability here. We cannot allow China's intentional wrongdoing to go unchecked. Americans deserve a government that looks at the best interest of all Americans. With that, let's open it up for questions.
Leader McCarthy.
Let's go without saying my name. Yes, sir.
Sure. With the select committee, now that it's been announced, do you think that can be a viable process to uncover what happened, what led up to January 6th? And will you commit to not putting the members in your conference who are spreading conspiracy theories or trying to minimize what happened on the 6th on that select committee?
No, I was just with the speaker. She's never talked to me about it. Haven't seen the structure of what she does or anything else, so I won't make any commitment till I go there. I have just sat back, and if any of you, I recommend you reading the work that the bipartisan committees on the Senate have done on this. And what's really concerning to me on much of it that you see is the knowledge that people had in the intelligence community, in the Capitol Police, and didn't warn. But if staff wanted to park that day, why did the parking attendants know that something was happening? Sergeant of Arms never talked to me as a Republican leader beforehand, during, or after. They failed a lot of their own men and women by not having the protections. They tell that they put it in a bus further away, but the bus was locked for the riot gear. There's failure after failure after failure. The Senate has done some very good work on a bipartisan manner in a committee. I've watched the FBI arrest more than 500 people. I want to make sure nothing gets in the way of that as others. But you want to make sure This is never repeated. That's why we've gave more than $10 million to the architect of the Capitol as well.
But just to follow up real quick, sir, you realize that if you were to get behind an effort to work bipartisanly, if that's a word, to work on a bipartisan basis on this select committee, whatever.
That would have been nice, huh? Yeah, I always like to do like that. Yes, ma'am.
Why are Republicans conflating all conversations about systemic racism and white supremacy with critical race theory when they are not the same thing?
I think critical race theory is wrong, and I don't think it should be taught in schools at all, and I don't think we should fund any money to allow that to happen. I've watched what's happening in school districts across this nation, and I don't think that is appropriate, nor should be taught, but I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, thank you. We know that the Senate's come up with this bipartisan infrastructure plan, but now Speaker Pelosi.
Deal, no deal.
Deal, no deal. So, but they're saying now that there is going to be a two-track negotiation, the bipartisan and a budget reconciliation. What are your members saying about the fact that, yeah, they want a bipartisan package, but then there's going to be more money later on as a guarantee to make sure that both of those happen?
I think my members think they need a chiropractor because they got whiplash after watching the president yesterday say there was a deal, then say there was no deal, and say you can't have a deal of $1 trillion on infrastructure, but you got to vote for $5 trillion the same time too, and you got to raise taxes on everybody, and you've got to have a Green New Deal. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to pass, and I think they killed any opportunity. I think it was disingenuous in every shape or form. Manu, how are you?
Doing great.
All right, I wrote down what I think your question is. Let me see if I get it
Well, I
right.
wanted to follow up about the select committee, because last month you did say that you'd be willing to testify before an outside commission. Now that there is a select committee, would you be open to talk about your conversation with Donald Trump to a select committee?
Well, I don't know that there is a select committee. The speaker's never talked to me about it. She hasn't set the scope. She didn't tell me about it. I haven't seen anything, so I don't know what it is. I haven't seen anything voted on. I'll wait till I review what that is. The question that you're referring to asked if I would talk to you about it. I have no problem talking to anybody about it. I don't know what the conversations that day would matter as that's going on. What I think would really matter, especially if you read the report that Bipartisan in the Senate has already done from 2 committees, it's the lack of taking knowledge that they had prior. And what did they do with that? That's what's caused a lot of the damage to this Capitol, that they had knowledge ahead of time. If the people in the parking structure knew, why didn't the Capitol Police know? If the intelligence had it, why didn't they pass it on? They didn't have the training. They didn't have the gear there for them. They didn't produce and warn people ahead of time. There is failure after failure. Why were there National Guards, a couple hundred, or about 160 some, but no weapons, patrolling the streets only from street signs, but not on the Capitol? Did someone deny the right of that coming from days before? Because they had meetings about it. Those are things that I think have to be answered. Some of that's answered in here, but I think it has to be fully answered. That is the only way you'll stop from happening what happened before. And for the idea, the speaker prior saying that the scope should be so narrow, we have an officer who gave his life on Good Friday. If you drive in the Capitol, you see his portrait. But we can't look at what caused that, because that was political as well, or what built up to this. Because I know in the 9/11 Commission, we looked at what built up all that time before September 11th. We watched what happened in the last summer. Did what happened in Washington, D.C. during the summer make somebody make a decision not to have the National Guard here to protect this building? That's a question that should be answered. Hey, congratulations on having Melanie join you. How's that going to work? Will you guys
We're going to tag team you.
tag team? All right.
Yeah.
Good cop, bad cop.
Help him with his questions. That was the best question he's had yet. Yes, sir.
Okay,
I like the color of your hair.
thank you.
It's distinguishing.
Yep.
How old were you when you first went gray? I was in my 20s.
Later than that.
Okay. Are you older than me?
No, you're older than me by about 4 or 5 years. All right, last
Do you know my
Wednesday, 21,
I'm sorry.
last Wednesday, 21 Republicans voted against giving the gold medal to the Capitol Police. That same day, Congressman Gosar accused the Capitol Police officer of lying in wait in order to execute one of the rioters here. The next day, 14 House Republicans voted against making Juneteenth a national holiday, and the week ended with Congressman Gohmert on the House floor suggesting that secret FBI agents were part of the January 6th crowd who probably helped egged on those rioters. Have any of those people in your conference received any type of stern lecture, any wording, anything about their behavior, given your self-proclaimed need for unity within the conference?
Well, what I talk to my members is what I talk to my members personally about. But if you want to talk to somebody about how they vote, talk to them. Both those votes are not names that I was a part of. I voted for Juneteenth. I voted for the medal, and from all aspects, it would raise the question too, from a scope of if Speaker Pelosi wants to do a select committee, why wouldn't she look at that officer that got killed and provided a medal to him as well? Isn't his life just as valuable as the others? Yes, sir.
Peter, I just want to ask you about H.R. 18 and the conscious effort on the House floor to bring it every day to talk about this. And what message do you want?
Well, what we're talking about is the Hyde Amendment. Regardless of what position you have when it comes to abortion, what has been the law of the land since 1976 was we do not use taxpayer funding for it. Overwhelmingly supported by Americans, regardless of the issue, especially independents. Every single person in Congress, I think probably outside of Don Young, have voted for the Hyde Amendment, Republican or Democrat. As the Democrats have now taken over the majority, they now want to change the course. I think if you go back and you look at the quotes as then Senator Biden, he was a strong supporter of the Hyde Amendment. He's had more than 30 years of service. I don't think he'd want to change his 30 years of voting in support of the Hyde Amendment. But apparently the Democrats want to change that, want to use taxpayer money, something that I think was one of the most bipartisan points that we have made. So for the next 18 days, we will ask to bring up Chris Smith's bill with unanimous consent. And we've watched those who sit in the speaker's chambers say, no, it's not agreed to on both sides. And I will tell them from a Republican side, we have no objections. They can bring it up. Yes, sir.
Now that the speaker announced a select committee and urged you to appoint responsible members, who are you considering of appointing? And given that a select committee is inherently more partisan than say a 9/11 style commission that you oppose, does that give you any pause on opposing and other House Republican leaders opposing the deal that your ranking member John Katko and Benny Thompson came together and crafted in a bipartisan nature? Does that give you any pause on opposing that?
Speaker Pelosi has wanted to play politics from day one. You're looking right here at a report done by the Senate Committee on Homeland and Rules, Republican and Democrat, in a bipartisan manner. Nancy Pelosi has spent all the time and all these months playing politics with this. And now we're finding select committee will be more politics of what she wants to do. The FBI is the appropriate place to investigate. You shouldn't be involved in it. In any of the investigation, let the FBI do their work. The architect of the Capitol has $10 million to make sure the structure is protected. You've got a report here that tells you the failures of what has gone on. We watched Speaker Pelosi sit and fight over the scope and over the size and wanted to make it more partisan. I wouldn't expect anything different from her, but I don't think the outcome will be of best use to the Capitol itself if you want to get down to the bottom of the answer. Yes,
Quick
sir.
follow-up. So the Democratic leader said the resolution to create the select committee is going to come up for a vote next week. Presuming that happens, how are you going to tell your members to vote, and will you set any preconditions on appointing Republicans to the committee?
Let me restate everything. The Speaker has never talked to me about the Select Committee. She's never told me there's going to be a Select Committee. I don't know what the scope is going to be. I don't know what the makeup's going to be. So I would hold judgment until I see what it is, just as I would do on any other bill. Yes, sir.
Yeah, on the economy, please. We've had a couple of weeks where the Fed Chairman, Mr. Powell, has said he's keeping an eye on inflation. Now, do you get a sense that it's because of government spending, or is it because of these temporary things of economic recovery post-COVID?
Well, most economists will tell you a lot of it happens to do with the Democratic policies. Let's take, for one, the extended unemployment. What's happened with the extended unemployment is you see the sheer numbers, more than 9 million jobs out there, but they're not being filled. Why? Because government's competing with the struggling small businesses. So now what has happened is people are paid more to stay home. But you have to pay more for people to go to work. You have to pay more than people who are working today. That causes inflation. So their action caused inflation. Most economists will tell you, too, in a supply-constrained economy of what we are today, the government spending of those $1.9 trillion with less than 9% going to COVID enhances inflation. And what does inflation do? Inflation raises the cost of everything. The coffee you bought today cost you more. When you filled your car up, your gas cost you much more. You'll continue to go to the store, fruits, vegetables, milk, whatever you buy, it will cost you more. If you're building a house, you'll see lumber like you've never seen. This continues to put the spiral where we have not seen inflation in a number of decades. Makes you feel a little like 1979. Well, I'm hopeful that these policies don't continue. And in an earlier question, you were talking about infrastructure. Any economist will tell you adding $5 trillion into this economy not only will break it, it'll cause greater inflation that causes the greatest tax increase on really those that are least deserving. Those that have the least amount of money will be charged the most. And then what we'll find as well, as no one's asked me about, when's the debt ceiling coming up? Well, the debt ceiling's coming up much faster because all the Democrats voted for that $1.9 trillion bill that had less than 9% going to COVID. So yeah, that's a much higher debt, faster. And the two greatest threats to this nation is China and our debt. And they're spiraling in both directions by not holding them accountable and continuing to waste money of what they're spending it on. Yes, sir.
What do you think of the policy?
Punchbowl.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. What do you think of the policies in the transportation, the infrastructure, compromise?
Look,
Inside the process, what do you think of the substance in that?
well, I thought a couple things that were very positive. I thought them narrowing it to actual infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, broadband, I thought was very productive on both sides for those Republicans and Democrats who worked with it. I think they worked through on some of the pay-fors. It didn't look like it was a true pay-for, but what they were going to take is some of the unemployment insurance that the states did not take to try to get their states working again. So it's something we already appropriated, utilized that money for there. I think that was a better use of that. So I thought that was very productive. And then when I watched the president go out and said he came to an agreement, that's always positive as an American that we can find agreement on both sides. But just a few moments later, I don't know what that agreement is if you say you can't have this unless you vote for another $5 trillion over here, and it has to be at the same time I won't sign it. That's no deal. And I think that's very difficult for a future Biden administration getting any agreement. Who can trust them? Who can think if you're sitting negotiating with somebody and you literally walk out to the microphones and say we have an agreement? I don't know if he whispered to him he was going to ask for $5 trillion more, but it doesn't work. I assume most every single member went there in good faith on Republican and Democrat side. And I imagine every single one who walks out feels in somehow it wasn't an honest negotiation. And that's a difficulty for America in getting something else done. Sorry, I didn't mean to shoot that at you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Leader, there were reports this morning that you were planning to meet with Officer Fanone?
Yes.
Who was injured on January 6th?
Yes.
Did that meeting occur already?
No, I'm going to meet with him today, though.
Okay, what's going to be, can you give us a preview of what that meeting's going to be?
We'll sit down and meet. I think he's going to bring a couple other people with him.
Secondly, will you be joining President Trump on the border next week?
No, we're in session. Yes.
Just to follow up,
Does that mean that even if you like the bipartisan infrastructure package, you would vote against it because you don't like the reconciliation?
I
package?
haven't seen the full bill, so I would wait. He asked me, are there positive things about it? So I laid out the positive things about it. I mean, if you're asking me to vote for $1 trillion bill and give you a position right now that I've never read, I couldn't give you an answer. That'd be wrong for my constituents to say I'm going to vote for something I haven't read yet.
I guess you view them as separate votes is what I'm asking. Or do you view them as
No,
separate votes?
I viewed them as separate votes when the president first came out and said he has an agreement on an infrastructure bill. But no, when they went to clarify and the speaker and Schumer said, no, you cannot vote on that until we have all the taxes and the Green New Deal and they have to go together. And then the president says he has to sign them together. It's one big deal. So it's not separated. I don't see any Republicans supporting that structure. I actually think the speaker's trying to kill it. Yes, Bill.
On the debt ceiling, what do Republicans need to see in exchange for agreeing to raise the debt ceiling? And if it's not done through reconciliation, where Democrats do need Republican support, I mean, how big of a fight is this going to be? And are Republicans willing to vote against it?
Well, we cannot continue to spend the way it's happening today, and I think we'd have to see real reform. And where are some real structural reforms that we're working to balance our budget and pay off the debt? I think that's what people would like to see. I mean, if you're continuing to spend trillions of dollars and waste it, call it a COVID bill, but less than 9%. First bring us a infrastructure bill, and again, it's less than 10% on real infrastructure. That's a problem.
Are Republicans willing to vote against raising the debt ceiling and risking?
Republicans will easily be willing to vote against waste, fraud, and abuse. And what I've seen in this new majority is a lot of that. I hope you all have a great weekend. Congratulations on the new job.
What question did you write down from Manu?
Huh?
What question did you write down from Manu?
He hit it. I've never been wrong with him yet. It's like, what was that old show? Who was Groucho Marx? Yes, sir. The Word of the Day. So I write them down. I should show them to you.
Yeah, I don't believe you.